Hello and welcome to AskFlagler's 2024 Florida House of Representatives candidate debate. I'm Chris Gollin, head writer at AskFlagler.com. We're doing this debate because it's important for candidates to be held accountable both by each other and by the voters, and to prove their ideas can stand up to questioning before they're entrusted with public service. Both the State House candidates in District 19 were invited to take part in this debate, with only Adam Morley accepting. His opponent, Sam Greco, declined to come and take his seat at the debate table. District 19 covers all of Flagler and part of St. Johns County, but representatives vote on issues that affect all Floridians. We'll be covering 5 topics of importance to voters, each containing 2 to 3 questions with 2 minutes for our candidate to answer. He will receive a silent notification when he has 15 seconds remaining and a verbal notice when his time has expired. To start off, Adam, you have the next 2.5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. My name is Adam Morley. I am a native to this district. I was born and raised here. It's where my wife and I are raising our family. It is where we own 2 businesses. We own a bait and tackle shop in Crescent Beach, and we just opened our 2nd business, the Inlet Beach and General Store at Matanzas Inlet. Having grown up here in a very rural and conservative district, I feel that I embody the values, the core values of the district, and I am looking to bring that accurate and genuine representation of my district to Tallahassee. What I have to continually reassure people of is that I'm running to represent my district, not a party. I am running because there are issues that are not being addressed at the state level, and I'm focusing on those issues as my priorities. Issues like addressing overdevelopment, clean water, and making sure that we can restore local control, aka home rule, something that Tallahassee has been stripping away from us for many years now. So those are my priorities. I'm the only candidate in the race that is actually from the district, has skin in the game here. My opponent, he just got here in February of this year, and I'll leave that at that.
So the first topic we're going to cover is simply politics. So 2 minutes. You're running as a Democrat in a district that skews heavily Republican. What makes you a better choice for conservative voters than your opponent, who has been endorsed by Paul Renner and Ron DeSantis?
Yeah, as I've mentioned, I'm from the district. I actually am part of the community here. I own businesses. I interact with people from across the political spectrum on a daily basis. I have relationships with people in the district. I have a pulse on what's going on. Where there's a political machine that is trying to keep a voting bloc to themselves for their special interests. And as you mentioned, my opponent has been endorsed by the outgoing Speaker of the House and the Governor, but that really shouldn't mean a whole lot for this position. This position is meant to be a position that represents the district, not representing a party, but representing people that live here in this community and in this district. And that's why I'm running. I'm running to bring that accurate representation, that genuine representation for a community that I'm a product of. I was, again, born and raised here. This is my home. Nobody's going to fight harder for this district and benefit this district as much as someone who's got skin in the game.
So if you are elected, you will almost certainly be in a body with a Republican supermajority. How can District 19 voters expect you to be an effective champion for their needs in that position?
Well, as you pointed out, this is a pretty conservative district. It's a very conservative district. Electing me alone is going to send such a powerful message that both parties are off in their current representation of the people. So if I get sent to Tallahassee, if I get elected, there's a couple things that'll happen. One, it's going to send a very strong message that the issues that I'm running on are issues that people care about and need to be addressed. I also have a lot more to lose. I am much more accountable to the voters in this district, being that I am on the Democratic ticket in a very red district. So if I'm not doing a darn good job representing and being an effective legislator, you could replace me in 2 years. Very simple. Because my opponent feels that he's safe, that's why he's not showing up, he feels it's a safe district, he doesn't have to answer questions, he doesn't have to even do a good job. He just has to be on the ballot to maintain this seat for 8 years.
So the next topic I wanted to cover is the state economy. The cost of living is a major issue for Floridians, and housing, groceries, gas, any number of living expenses. So according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Florida experienced the highest rate of inflation in the country in a 12-month period that ended in April 2024. What, if anything, can be done at the state level to manage inflation in Florida?
So as a state representative, I would be one of 120 state representatives. Those issues will need to be addressed as a whole body. As you pointed out, it's going to be a supermajority. It's going to be a supermajority Republicans in the state legislature, as it has been for nearly 20 years now. If they wanted to address any of these issues, they could have addressed them with a party line vote. If they cared to address inflation, if they cared to do anything at the state level, they have held total power, total control for 20 years. They could have done something. So on issues like that, and there's going to be other issues where no matter how bad I, as a Democrat, want to do something about these issues, until the legislature stops giving them lip service and starts acting on them, there's not a whole lot that we're going to be able to do. We need to be asking our current legislators and those who hold the majority when they're going to actually act on it and not just give it lip service.
According to data from Zillow and the U.S. News and World Report, Florida has the 9th highest average rent and the 17th highest cost of housing in the nation, but only the 33rd highest average household income. What would you propose to make housing more affordable for Floridians?
So I've actually been talking about this more frequently within the last couple weeks. Talked about it in the past campaigns as well. My wife and I actually lived in a tiny house for a while. And there's a lot of communities, a lot of other states that have cities and communities that have been experimenting with the implementation of tiny houses as auxiliary dwelling units. I think this has a lot of potential for a couple reasons. One, young professionals that are just getting started don't need big single-family homes. They just need a place. They want their independence. If we were able to, and this is going to be more of a local level issue than a state level issue, but the state can help out with it as well. But at the local level, keep in mind both counties that my district includes, neither of them are very friendly towards the concept of tiny houses or tiny house communities. Housing is expensive because they are often too large for the need. So if we have young professionals that can live in a smaller dwelling, that's going to be more affordable. That's going to allow them to get onto their feet, get their career started, and then once they get established and meet somebody, start a family, then they can move into a larger home, opening up the smaller dwelling once again for young professionals. On the flip side, retirees have the ability with these accessory dwelling units that if they're living in a big single family home but their family has all moved out, we have the option where they can move into the auxiliary dwelling, they can downsize, and then they can rent out the larger single family home to a family that needs it. So rather than a one home fits all approach, I think we can start creating more dynamic housing rather than trying to build huge houses for each individual.
So the state legislature this year placed limitations on local regulations toward vacation rentals. Do you feel that local governments should have more power to regulate in that sphere?
Absolutely. As I mentioned in my opening, the restoration of home rule and local control. It's not just this year. For the last decade, the legislature has gotten very comfortable passing preemption laws, removing the local control, removing home rule from our communities. That home rule is given to us in the state's constitution, but the state has continued on other issues as well to erode away our state's constitution and our home rule in local communities. So home rule allows for us to maintain and protect the very character of our communities that often attract people and retain people to live here. People move here from areas that have lost the vibe that they moved into for in the first place. They lost the character, they've gotten overdeveloped, and it's become a concrete jungle. And so they're looking for communities that have the character of old Florida. And we have a lot of those communities right here in District 19. So yeah, I do think that we need more local control, more home rule, because the people here know what's best for our communities, not bureaucrats in Tallahassee. The people here closest to, the government closest to the people is the most efficient government at addressing issues that impact us on a daily basis. So yeah, we need home rule. We need that local control. Tallahassee needs to stop taking it from us.
Now, on to that point, as a follow-up, you being from St. Augustine, I know this is a place where this is one of the, it's a very hotbed issue in that community. Now, say if a city, and I'm not singling out St. Augustine, I'm not saying they're doing it, but if you have a local government which maybe wants to keep restrictions on vacation rentals loose because of the tax revenue that it brings in, but maybe theoretically to a point where it becomes a little untenable for the permanent residents there, should there be something the state can do to step in the event of that happening?
Again, I think that the government closest to the people is the most efficient way of addressing these issues. It is a lot more difficult to change things at the state level than it is at the local level. If your local elected officials are passing or not addressing the issues the way that you want, you are going to be able to more effectively rally and get a candidate to run against the candidates that are not doing as you wish them to do, and then unseat them and pass those local ordinances, address those issues locally. It is a lot easier because you can elect and reject candidates at the local level a lot easier than you can as you start going up the levels in government. Because once you start getting to the state level and beyond, like we're dealing with here, you're having to do a lot more. You have a larger area with more people that all have a say in that matter. So if St. Augustine has an issue that's impacting them, they should be able to address it at the city level. Because down here in Palm Coast, they might have a different approach that they want to use. Palm Coast should have the ability to also have a say in what happens in Palm Coast, what happens in St. Augustine. St. Augustine residents should have a say in that. But when you start blowing it up to a larger body of voters, it's going to be difficult to address local issues at the state level.
So the next topic that I wanted to cover is the environment. And that doesn't just necessarily mean climate change, which is the thing that voters often think of with the environment, but it also means pollution, it means litter necessarily, it means just the quality and well-being of natural land in and around communities. And the first thing I wanted to ask about is this year, Amendment 2 is going to be on the ballot, which is known as the right to hunt and fish. And per its summary, it establishes hunting and fishing as a public right in Florida. Drawing on your experience as a fishing captain, do you support Amendment 2?
So, as the owner of a bait and tackle shop, as someone who grew up hunting and fishing, my opinion is irrelevant because this is a constitutional amendment. My job as a legislator is to implement and uphold the state constitution. Whether I agree with the amendments or not it's my job as a legislator to make sure that the amendments are implemented and followed. So we have a secret vote for a reason on that issue, although it's no secret. I am actually not in favor of this because it is a legislatively referred constitutional amendment, meaning that it came from the legislature. The bar was much lower as far as the process that it needed to go through in order to get approval to be on the ballot. It didn't have the same public input and have to pass the same rigorous public process. And I think that the public process is how we maintain the checks and balances with these types of issues. So personally, I don't agree with Amendment 2. I recommend no. However, if elected and if that amendment passes, it's my job to make sure that it is implemented as understood by voters.
So data shows that, and the data that I used was from Florida Fish and Wildlife, that red tide is growing to be more frequent and thus more severe in Florida's waters, leading to mass die-offs of marine organisms. A lot of voters hear about that with the manatees. What can the legislature do to help fight this trend with red tide and curtail that?
And it's not just red tide, it's the blue-green toxic algae as well, the cyanobacteria, which is a neurotoxin that's coming from excess nutrient runoff, especially down in South Florida, Lake Okeechobee, issues like that. That same excess nutrient runoff is what's helping fuel the red tide. The Carina brevis, I believe, is the scientific name for the red tide. The solutions, I'll give DeSantis credit on this one. When he took office, he enacted or created the Blue-Green Toxic Algae Task Force. Science-based scientists, individuals were appointed to this task force to come up with proposals to address the state's water quality crisis. And they came up with a list of things that they could pass through the legislature to address our water quality issues. And this is where things kind of fall apart, is that there was no follow through. So we have a list of things that were recommended by scientists that were appointed by DeSantis. But that list is just sitting around cabinet somewhere, not being proposed. So that would be one of my first things as a legislator, would be to take that list out and start drafting up a proposal to implement those recommendations from the scientists that DeSantis appointed to address the water quality issues in Florida.
The next topic that I wanted to cover is public safety. This is something near and dear to really everyone in the state, but especially in Flagler County, where our sheriff's office is as popular as it is. Public safety is often at the heart of how people vote on any number of elections, of measures and issues that are on the ballot. So the average police officer's salary, according to World Population Review in Florida, is $78,480, which is 16th highest in the nation. Do you feel that law enforcement officers in Florida are paid too much, not enough, or about right?
The individuals themselves, I think, could use a raise. The process, the allocation process, I think that they could use a raise, but at the same time, Florida isn't short on cash, as the governor and the legislature has boasted. There's a surplus, and I do think that we could take a load off of some of these law enforcement individuals and put that load into other areas. Make sure that when there's a call that comes in for a mental health crisis, that trained individuals in mental health crisis are able to respond rather than law enforcement. So I think that law enforcement is overburdened with their roles, with the expectations that people have of them. I think that they need to be there for public safety, but I think that they have too much on their plate as law enforcement officials.
So taking a little bit of a different approach to public safety, Florida was recently hit by the back-to-back impacts of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. How would you assess the state's energy and structural infrastructure in terms of preparedness for natural disasters, mostly hurricanes?
Ask that again.
So with the recent impacts of Helene and Milton in mind and how that affected the state, how would you assess the state's infrastructure, both where it concerns our power lines, our electricity, and the actual infrastructure, the homes, the buildings in the state, in how well they're prepared to handle natural disasters like those hurricanes?
So I think one of the issues that we're facing in the state is these state-sanctioned monopolies for the power companies. I do believe in kind of decentralizing the grid, because the grid is weak. It is a weak point in our structure as a society, especially here in Florida. I think decentralizing the power and opening up the market for more solar. We are the sunshine state. It makes sense to move more towards solar, but we have state-sanctioned monopolies, the power companies, that are trying to maintain their control over the state, maintain their power, pun intended, and they are using our money that we're forced to pay them to lobby for legislation that benefits them. I think that we need more of a fair market approach where solar has the opportunity to come in and start addressing a lot of the power and the grid issues. Rooftop solar being a very viable way of doing it.
And I did also want to touch on, though, is the structural infrastructure, our buildings, especially in coastal Florida, where storm surge has, in Volusia County a couple of years ago, a lot of buildings were condemned, a lot were destroyed because of the erosion that reached onto them. How would you assess that from the structural side of things?
So Florida does live, the Florida East Coast is a high energy coastline. We are going to consistently get storms into the future, for the foreseeable future, forever. That's the nature of living on a peninsula close to the tropics. We're going to get tropical weather. So we need to start thinking about how infrastructure is built, how infrastructure is dealt with, and I was actually really surprised to hear the state legislature already start talking of the idea of a planned retreat from the coastlines. And that's an interesting approach, especially coming from the legislature, but I don't know about how we're going to address those issues. I would say that we need to make sure that codes, and a lot of times that's going to be local building codes, state can back that up, like they did with Andrew. When Andrew came through, that forced the state to step up their building codes so that we had a stronger buildings, stronger infrastructure, because when Andrew came through, it showed us that our buildings were not strong enough for the storms that we're now facing. So we can do something like that, but there's obviously going to be pushback from the development industry, because they would prefer to continue to build cheap homes, not homes that are going to, or buildings that are going to withstand storms. They want to build for as cheap as possible and sell for as much as possible. That's the nature of the market.
And before we left that topic, I did want to circle back just quickly to the issue with power in the state that you touched on. So you mentioned a little bit of decentralizing the Florida's power network and exploring alternate methods such as solar. Now, I can think of one company that is very prevalent in Florida's power that may have a certain reaction to that, called Florida Power and Light. When you are considering ideas like that, are you thinking more of trying to bring other companies into the fold, or trying to work with FPL in the kind of the status they have? I don't want to say the word monopoly, but the monopolistic status they have in Florida, to try and get them to diversify how they serve.
It is absolutely a state-sanctioned monopoly. That's how it is set up. We are able to try to purchase our power through, or try to purchase sustainable energy, but we're still using their grid. And whenever that's the case, it's going to be a problem. If we're using someone else's grid, they own that, they kind of get to make the rules. So FPL, I'm not their biggest fan at all. They have, if they put half as much energy and resources into moving towards solar as they do lobbying against it, we could start making some progress. But they have solar fields. There's a lot of issues with the solar farms themselves shadowing out a lot of environmental reasons with expansive amounts of land being shaded out by these solar farms. We need to do better than what FPNL is doing with their solar programs. And I don't think they're interested. I'd be willing to work with them if they are, but if they're not interested, which we don't get the sense that they are, we need to make sure that other companies who want to come in and help people become power independent, have their own source of energy production, we need to be able to allow that, rather than having all of these state laws that are backed by FPNL. Usually the laws are written by organizations associated with FPNL. These laws are literally being passed to stop residents, stop Floridians from pursuing cost-effective solar, because it's in favor of FPNL, who has a monopoly and is in control of the legislature for a great part of the deal.
So the last topic I wanted to cover is education. Living in Florida in the last 2 years, education it has spent a lot of time as the most talked about issue in Florida, and the rest of the nation talking about Florida. It has dominated news headlines in a multitude of ways for some time now on many different fronts. So toward the subject of education, recent years have seen increased involvement by the state government in county school districts. Are students in a better classroom environment now than they were 4 years ago?
I'm going to go with no on that one. When you have partisan politics trying to get involved with what really should be addressed locally, you're going to have a problem. When you have a governor who's trying to make school board races partisan,
which is on the ballot this year.
Which is on the ballot. We don't think it's going to pass. Nobody I know thinks that is a good idea. But even before this got onto the ballot, you had a governor who was endorsing certain candidates for local school board races. And I think that's the dangerous road to go down when you have candidates that are at one level who wield a lot of power trying to influence the politics of local school board elections. That can be very dangerous and counterproductive to education in general. So I think there's a lot that we can do to improve state education. I think one of the biggest issues, again, is with overdevelopment. I just found out that by the time a school is actually completed, it's already over capacity in the district, in District 19. And because of that, these schools have to get the pods, the mobile classrooms, or the
portables, as we call them.
Portables, yes. So I just found out, and this kind of tracks with the way that the state is currently doing business, those are actually privately owned and the schools have to rent them. So these schools are being built to, time's up, but I'll
if you
continue.
want to end your sentence.
I do. These schools are being built, by the time they're complete, they're already over capacity, and I'm thinking it's by design because there are privately owned companies that are now profiting by renting these pods, these portables, out to these schools. That's a problem.
So last year, Governor DeSantis signed a bill expanding school voucher access in Florida, with hundreds of thousands of students now utilizing that program. How do you stand on Florida's implementation of school choice?
I do believe in choice, but not at the cost of public schools. Public schools are, as it's been said, the cornerstone of our democracy. Like, we need a strong public education system. And the move towards privatization, the move towards charter schools, while I'm in support of choice, we need to make sure that we still have a healthy and robust and well-funded public education system, because we all benefit from an educated public. Whether we have children or not, whether our children are grown and gone, or if we're not having children at all, everybody benefits from a well-informed and well-educated public. When you start looking at public dollars going to private schools that are not held to the same standards, charter schools and the voucher programs, I don't have a problem with them. I have a problem with them siphoning money away from our public school system. We have the money. We need to make sure that the public school system is supported. And then if people still want to choose to put their children in private schools, that needs to be privately funded. Public dollars for public education. Private dollars for private education.
Mm-hmm. And I have one follow-up, and we'll maybe do like 1 minute on that, just as a follow-up question. But as I mentioned initially, it is a significant number of students in Florida are utilizing this program.
My son included.
With so and then that's one thing too, is if your son is using the school voucher program, for parents across the state whose kids are utilizing it, would your policy approach to this in the legislature, if given the opportunity to pass the policies that you support in regards to this, should parents who utilize this be concerned that you would support an approach that might remove the government funding that allows their kids to be able to go to these other schools?
So, as we started the conversation earlier, this is not something that voters in my race need to be concerned about, because again, it's going to be a supermajority Republican legislature. There's not going to be any movement on anything that they don't want movement on. So if they like it the way that it is, they're going to get it the way that it is. That's why my priorities are common ground issues that I know I can move the needle on, that aren't partisan, doesn't have any of the political ideologies behind it. These are issues that impact everybody in this state and in this district, that everybody can rally behind and get behind it. That's the only way that I'm going to be an effective legislator. By going after issues that aren't popular in my district, trying to be partisan in any way, is not going to be an effective way of addressing any issues. So again, this is not something people need to be concerned about with me, because it's not going to be addressed until the legislature is ready to address it. I'm not making that decision.
All right, and with that is the last planned question. So now, with that being said, I do want to thank you again for participating in our debate. I wish it were a little more of a debate.
As do I.
But with that in mind, I will now give you your 2.5 minutes to deliver a closing statement.
I appreciate it. Again, appreciate the opportunity. Sam, wish you were here. Would have loved to hear from you, as well as the voters. But again, I am the only candidate that is showing up. I am from here, own businesses here, raised my family here. I've got skin in the game. I'm accessible. I'm accountable. I am everything that voters want, should want, or expect from a person in this position. These are seats that need to be filled by folks who understand the community that they're supposed to be representing. If we bring partisan politics into these races, we all lose. We need to start figuring out ways to address common ground issues so that we can start working together and building bridges and building lines of communication so that we can later on address some of the more challenging conversations. So as a candidate, my promise to the district and to the voters are to focus on the issues that people care about, the common ground issues, the collective interests of the people here in District 19 as a whole, addressing overdevelopment to make sure that we don't have a decrease in the quality of life that we have here. We need to make sure that clean water throughout the state is protected because it is the economic driver behind our state. And we need to make sure that we have local control and home rule. The restoration of local control and home rule is essential in being able to determine the direction that we go as a community and maintain and protect the character and the characteristics of the community that we love and enjoy as much as we do. So those are my promises on what I'm going to focus on as the next state representative, and I promise I will be accessible. I can't run from anybody. I own businesses here. I'm a part of this community. My information is out there. People can reach me via my cell phone, 904-540-7245. Reach out if you got questions or concerns. Text, email, go to votemorley.com and reach out to me. I am accessible.
All right, Adam, thank you again. And to those watching, early voting has already started here in Flagler County. Make sure you're researching who is on your ballot, research their priorities, research their donations, read your local news outlets. Your local news outlets are not here to mislead or deceive you. I can promise you that firsthand. Do your research, be an informed voter no matter how you vote, and above all else, make sure you vote. Thank you for watching Ask Flagler's State House District 19 candidate debate, and like I said a second ago, be sure to vote. Thank you.